Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Smith. I am one half of the Colonel and the Coach. I am joined by my co-host, Kim Ellsworth. And today we have a very, very special guest, President Emeritus Richard Schneider, who served as the president of Norwich for many, many years, which we're going to get into that here in a second. He's also a Coast Guard Academy graduate and someone who is near and dear to my heart, who welcomed me with open arms when I arrived at Norwich back in 2018. So, President Schneider, welcome to the On Authentic Leadership podcast. It is wonderful to have you.
Well, listen, it is great to see you two guys and to talk about leadership, which I know is important to all of us. So I'm really looking forward to this. Thanks for reaching out.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Kim?
Yeah. So, President Schneider, we usually start, and if you could just give us kind of the Cliff Notes version of where you're from, but what got you to Norwich? I know Norwich is something where we all connected, but maybe where you started to there.
It's kind of a miracle that I was there, honestly. So for your listeners, it's great to be here. And I hope that you might glean a couple nuggets of something that might be of service to you in your walk on improving your leadership. I'm a Coast Guard Academy officer. That's who I am all the way through. Grew up in New Jersey most of the time, went to school, high school there, got a pretty good education and got in as an alternate to the Coast Guard Academy. 2 weeks before the classmate, I got a telegram. My family had never gotten a telegram. And it said, you have 24 hours to tell us if you want to go to the Coast Guard Academy. I was actually going to the Merchant Marine Academy because I really wanted to sail. And my grandfather was my hero. Fought in World War I and II, but he was a merchant shipper. So World War I came along, they made him a lieutenant commander, boom, on the spot, and gave him a ship. And then World War II happened and made him a captain. And they sent him back to his home in Scotland, and he helped plan the invasion of Normandy. So really kind of a great guy, but he was my hero. So I just wanted to be my grandfather. So that was going to the Merchant Marine Academy or the Coast Guard Academy. I love that idea too, but I got in and I got an appointment to Merchant Marine Academy, but I got an alternate. And this is one of those life lessons that I taught every one of our students. Listen, it may not work out the first time. That doesn't mean you stop. You don't quit. You say, I'm going to live the Norwich motto, which is I will try. This is a very tough thing to do, even in the face of adversity, but you never know what happens. So 2 weeks before the classmate, I got this telegram. I said, okay, Dad, send a telegram to Merchant Marine Academy. I'm not coming. Send one to the Coast Guard Academy. I'm going there. And the reason was that about when I was 14 years old, my grandfather said to me, you know, Rich, you would not have been born if it wasn't for the Coast Guard. I said, really? Why? He said, because I had lost a ship and they saved me. And your mother wouldn't have been born. Like, how cool is that, right? And I wanted to sail
That's
Eagle
awesome.
anyway with the square rigger, the only one under flag of the United States other than the Constitution, and she doesn't really sail. They kind of push her around Boston Harbor, but we sail on it, and we train our Coast Guard Academy cadets to be professional mariners on it. And that's, I think, still the best way to do it. So I went to the Coast Guard Academy knowing I'm the dumbest guy in this class. Right? 2 weeks before. Everybody else, most of the class had principal appointments. But I did okay there. I loved it there. I ended up pretty much at the top of the class and was the regimental commander there and the sailing master of the Bark Eagle, which was really kind of cool. I went to sea, which is what we all did. A year in Vietnam also. I was on something about the size of a destroyer, which wasn't the largest thing the Coast Guard has. The largest thing the Coast Guard has is icebreakers. We don't have enough of them. That's another podcast about the Arctic and the Antarctic, but 2 years teaching celestial navigation and everything else, piloting, gunnery, marching, everything at Officer Candidate School. They sent me to grad school for 2 years to learn physics, to teach it at the Coast Guard Academy. So I get selected for lieutenant commander while I'm there, volunteered to be the assistant dean. There's another life lesson. Yes, you should always volunteer. You never know what that other experience is going to do for you. And we got the word after having 4 kids, by the way, thanks to our Navy, because the Coast Guard doesn't have any hospitals. Actually, Matt, one was born in an Air Force hospital. Because I know, it's great, right? I have 4 girls, each 2 years apart at the government expense. I was home long enough to conceive the first one, but for my wife, my father-in-law, great guy, took my wife to the hospital. And people don't think about this, but, our people that are gone, our kids that are deployed, their families are still going.
Yes, sir.
And, they need support.
Yes, sir.
They really do on simple things. By the way, that's when everything breaks anyway, when you're deployed. Washing machine, refrigerator, car, everything. So anyway, docs told me, hey, you don't have much time with this girl. You're going to have to figure out what you want to do. So I've had 9 years in the service. I was going back to sea again. And you just can't do that as a single dad and have 4 little kids. And the youngest one was maybe 12, I think. So I got out, and scary thing to do. Tough, second hardest decision in my life was to decide to resign on my commission. But I stayed a reservist. But I figured, okay, I can't drive ships anymore. I guess I can do this higher ed gig. It doesn't get underway. And I slid into higher ed, never having intended to be that. I ended up being the number 2 person at the College of Marine Studies at the University of Delaware, and had a wonderful 10 years there, finished my doctoral work there, but not in physics. I took it in finance. One of the greatest things I ever learned about being a college president. You got to keep track of the money. And by the way, I think this is true for any leader of any organization. If you don't understand what's happening to the money, you cannot be effective. You do not know your business well enough. But I took it in finance there, and I didn't think I could do the math for a PhD in physics anymore. So I went to work at Drexel for 8 years. I had wonderful mentors there. I had a lot of different positions too, senior positions. I always kept the vice president for research job. I love that. I could keep close enough to physics because it was a very technological school. Had a lot to do with the money, federal grants and contracts we were growing. And I was an engineer as an undergrad. So I'm like an inch deep but a mile wide academically. I can talk to any professor anywhere. I think I can think it through. So I could handle the engineering, I could handle all the science thing, and then I could do all the business stuff. And actually, the thing that I used the most as a university president was the finance part, really the finance part. That, and I think my emotional intelligence, which the Coast Guard really worked on. Your leadership is all about your emotional intelligence. How do the things that you say impact on your people? How do they react to you? And I have fired people that were wonderfully expert in their individual field. Their IQ is particularly true in higher ed, faculty members generally. Their IQ is very high. Their EQ is very low. These are people that go to the library alone, dig, study, do all the things to learn that specific thing, and don't have a lot of interaction with other people. That doesn't mean they're stupid. They're just not informed. They're ignorant about certain things. And it's important as a leader to know, where are your people coming from? And generally, if you're in regular business, I'm going to say, and I never worked for a business, okay? So I've only been in not-for-profit land, the government and higher ed. But it was a wonderful 8 years there at Drexel, and they came looking for me. I was a reservist. Remember, I told you I had 9 years active and then the rest of the time reservist. And I was getting really up. I was a captain, which is like Matt, a colonel equivalent, 06. I had the Port of Philadelphia for a couple of years, then had the Port of New York. And then I always picked for flag there as a reservist. The Coast Guard has 2 reserve flags, and they have quite a few now active duty flags, but still only 2 reserve flags. So I had from the Rocky Mountains east to Israel. That was my area of responsibility. And that was usually the senior flag position, the 2-star. And the 1-star, the rear admiral lower half, would have from the Rocky Mountains just short of Israel. And we provided all the manpower reservists. They had to be trained and equipped and mobilized and ready to send. And then the regular active duty people basically controlled our reservists once we passed them over to them. So I was able to stay in the Coast Guard, stay connected to the Coast Guard. I loved the Coast Guard. That would have been really hard to leave that too. So the people at Norwich came looking for me. I really wasn't looking. The way this works, these headhunting firms, okay, so our president at Norwich, and I went through at Drexel, I went through 3 presidents in 8 years. It was terrible. I mean, I served each one of them valiantly, honestly, told them stuff they didn't want to hear, but I told them anyway, and got promoted kind of like even in this chaotic time, and ending up, I was kind of holding the ship together while we were cycling through presidents. But I had great mentorship there and a great opportunity there to learn all those various positions. Vice President for Research, the VP for Technology, which was a huge issue at Drexel. I was the treasurer for 2 years while we were looking for a treasurer. I was the provost for 2 years, acting provost, while we were looking for a provost. And I think when the guys at Norwich heard that I was a 06 Academy grad and also an academic with an earned PhD in higher ed, they were very, very interested in me. The only problem was I was a coastie. Now, for your listeners, Norwich has primarily been an Army school. We left the Air Force there when Matt was there, the Air Force ROTC thing. But we were founded in 1819, so we're the 5th oldest school in America, the only private military college left standing in the country, and the birthplace of the Reserve Officer Training Corps. It is very Army centric. And the football game between Coast Guard and Norwich is called the Little Army Navy game. So the fact that I got hate mail for 3 years from Norwich guys, what do you mean we couldn't find a decent Army general to run this Army school? And I would write back and say, hey, thanks so much for your support. I didn't hire myself. I'm sending your letter on to the chairman of the board. It did. And I never hear from them again. I think the Norwich guys finally got used to living with me for 28 years. It was the longest presidency, certainly at Norwich, and one of the longest, I think, in higher ed experience in America. It didn't have to be that long, except I loved it. And about year 7 or 8, when I started to get things under control, and I know, Matt, you guys want to talk about how I did that.
Yes, sir.
The headhunters started to come calling on me and say, hey, we got this great opportunity. It's a much bigger school. We'd like to put your name in there. I said, no, I don't want to do that. Where I am, I have a regiment that I'm responsible for, that I'm preparing to be commissioned officers. Where else can I go and do that? You can't go to a Coast Guard Academy, although for 3 years, the kids thought I was going to stay for 3 years and then go to be the superintendent of the Coast Guard Academy. It's only an active duty slot. All those schools are active duty slots. So I said, no, I'm perfectly comfortable. I'm in exactly the right place. And I think for your listeners, this is really important. Bigger isn't always better. Better is better. Bigger isn't better. And that didn't impress me that, okay, yeah, I had 2,500 students. You have 5,000 students. It's the same problems, parking. So it's just a matter of scale.
Yeah.
Okay. And I didn't need better, or I didn't need bigger. I just wanted to make my little school the best it can be for those students that are going to serve America. Now, I had civilian students too, and we still do that, so that anyone's listening to this, if you have a kid that wants to go to college, we have the place for them. And we build it just like the Department of Defense. 2 in uniform for every civilian, because you can't fight without your civilians anymore. In fact, Norwich, to its credit, could still be all male because it's private. VMI, the Citadel, Texas A&M, North Georgia, and Virginia Tech are all state schools. They had to admit women. It was a legal requirement. But as a private school, we could still be all male. And we were the first ones to admit women. Why was that? Because the trustees and the president at the time, 1970, said, listen, if our Army is going to use women differently, we have got to get the students used to living with women in a different way. It's better to make the mistakes now in college than it is when you're a second lieutenant and you just show up to your first unit. And so understanding the backgrounds that your employees have about what experiences they have of working with other kinds of people is really important, because they may be walking into a situation that you're going to put them in charge of, but they have not a clue how to relate to those people. And most of us don't think about that when we're moving or hiring people around. Now, I said I would share with you how these headhunter firms work. And so for all of you interested in maybe doing something different or at a bigger place, remember, bigger isn't better. Is it a better fit for you is the good question. Here's how they work. They come in, these headhunter firms. So we were without a president. I was the acting president for a while. Not long, thank God, but for long enough. And they say, okay, what do we need in the new guy? What are the characteristics we need of the new guy that we want to hire? And they're talking to each of the vice presidents, who usually are the direct reports to the president. They don't really care what you say. They're trying to figure out, where do I put Cam? Where do I put Matt? Because they are in the business of placing people. Now, they'd like the person to stick, but that's not the biggest issue for them. It's getting them there and just making the order happen and make the sale.
Right.
The school says, okay, we're going to hire Matt. He'd make a great president or a great vice president, whatever position you might be going for. But that's how they work. So 3 years after we had this search, this same guy that interviewed me came to me and said, Rich, I found you the exactly perfect school for you. I said, that's so nice. I wasn't looking. My kids were in school. 2 of them were still in high school. You know, without their mother, I'm kind of like doing the whole thing, right? And they said, no, it's a perfect school for you. I said, well, where is it? Well, they say you don't know it. I said, okay, but where is it? In Vermont. Okay, Vermont's a beautiful state. I know that. And I said, well, what school is it? Well, you don't know it. And I finally got him to tell me who it was. It says Norwich. I said, of course I know it. We played football against them. I went there by train. This is when both schools had enough money. We took train trips to each other's campus. They take half the regiment. We would take a sleeper car. I'd never been on a sleeper car before. Here I am, a sophomore at the Coast Guard Academy. We call them third classmen. Seniors are first classmen. A sleeper car to Northfield, where Cam lives. And we got off at the train station, Cam, and they marched us through town on Saturday morning, marched us through town. We ate second mess, which is lunch for you non-military people, lunch with the Corps, went to the game, and they had a party for us after the game. And then I think at 10 o'clock, they lined us all up again and marched us back to the center of town to catch the train back to New London, because in those days, we had to go to chapel. So this was probably 65. In 66, it became illegal for the military to say you had to go to some kind of religious service, which we all had to do. All the service academies had to do that up to 66. So I said, of course I know them. I've been there. And then it was kind of like, all right, so I'm 45 years old. I walk into this room. I think it's the biggest selection committee in the history of higher ed. And the reason is we had two campuses and everybody wanted to be equally represented. So there were students from both campuses. The Montpelier campus, where Matt lives, was on the hill in Montpelier. It used to be an all-girls school, and we were an all-boys school in the 70s. They were going out of business. We acquired them. We acquired them because the trustee said, oh my God, who are the boys going to date? Both schools were going bankrupt. Remember in the 70s, it was tough to get people to send your kid to military school because they knew where you were going. You were going to Vietnam. So it was a very unique kids that we would get that really wanted to serve. It was really fabulous. So it was very large. I walk in, they're all in a semicircle. And they say, okay, you sit here, like in the apex of the semicircle, right? And I said, well, no, let me go around and just say hi to everybody first. So I went around and shook my hand, and I had done homework on them. All right, so if any of you are listening to this and you're in a search, you need to know more about that business that you're searching for than they know. This is how you get the job. You know more about their business than they do. And I knew who was on the search committee because I had done my homework, studied them like I did my PhD. I read 3 years of trustee minutes, 3 years of faculty senate minutes, 3 years of the school newspaper. Boy, you learn a lot in the school newspaper. And by the way, if you're looking for a regular job in business, reading the local paper gives you an idea of what the town mothers and fathers think about you as an industry in their town. I read the accreditation reports. I looked at the hockey scores, coach, because I knew hockey was big there. And so I walked in and I said hi to everybody. And I didn't know who they were. I kind of guessed on the kids. I said, oh, yeah, you're my history professor. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yes, you're my hockey coach. Good luck this season. And I tried to establish some quick personal relationship with them because leadership is all about personal relationships. You have to have a clear vision of where the hell you want to go, but you have to establish great personal relationships. So I sat down. And by the way, I was the second guy to be interviewed out of the 8. And we all had just 2 hours. It was a Saturday, Sunday event. And they would go through 4 on Saturday and 4 on Sunday, 2 hours each. Everybody else just sat down in the middle of the semicircle. No one else met anybody. And when I said about, I don't know, third or fourth question, I said, well, if somebody asked me a question about admissions, I said, well, do you know you're already spending $5,500 per applicant? $5,500. I said, yeah, that's what you're spending. You didn't know that? Well, no. I said, well, you need to know that, right? And all of a sudden, I'm the expert about their school. And then they started asking me questions, and I had answers for them. So people are expecting your leaders to be competent, but they also have to be compassionate and driven and all those other things. But you need to know the business. You cannot BS your way through an important job like that. You can't. They will know instantly if you know what you're doing. And so this is why we spend so much time with junior officers, getting them ready, moving them every 2 or 3 years to get other experiences, to have other perspectives so that when you're confronted with a problem you've never seen before, you can figure it out. At least you're not starting from zero. You have other experiences and other problems that you've gone through. So we were always preparing as young officers to be the commandant of the Coast Guard. Matt was preparing to be the chief of staff of the Air Force. Now, whether he knew it as a young officer or not is another question, but that's what they were doing. They have to pick it from one of us. One of us in the Coast Guard has to be the commandant. So they want to give all of us as big of experiences as you can. And when I was the president of Norwich, every 2 weeks, I made all of my vice presidents all get together in the same room. It was called the cabinet. And we only had a couple rules. One is you could say anything about anybody else's operation, but don't make it personal. But if it's negatively impacting your business or your ability to deliver good service, you needed to put it on the table and we needed to deal with it. And you could never kill the messenger. That's another problem that other leaders have. They shoot the messenger. Those guys are exactly the ones you need to protect because they care enough for you. And it's usually the employee that's the biggest pain in the butt. That's actually the one that cares the most. It drives them crazy if it's not done right. And so they're trying to tell you and get your attention, like, this is not working right. And if you don't listen to them, it's going to keep not working. So I would get them in the room, and it was very clear. I'm mentoring you to be the president of Norwich. If all the 7 of us, the rest of us, get killed in a bus somewhere or go down in a plane, Gumblatz is left, and he's going to run the place till we pick a new president. So if you go into this knowing that I am trying to teach you how to be a president, and I've mentored a lot of college presidents, and I think that's why after about 10 years, I started getting really great candidates. And they would hear in the interview, because I was usually at the end of the process, yeah, I want to work here because I want your president to mentor me. And man, that's a huge compliment. I took it as a huge compliment. And I got great people. I said, look, I'd love to have 3 or 4 years with you to get you ready, but I'm going to work you double hard. You're going to work here, but then you're also going to putting on your president's hat. How would you solve this if you were the president? And when I used to travel overseas, because we had a lot of international students too, I would always pick somebody to be the acting president. It is amazing what you learn sitting in the chair of somebody else, even if it's just 2 weeks. By the way, this is a test that I use when I do consulting for presidents, and I've done some. They should know exactly how you would respond in every situation if you were not there. So let's say you 2 are my vice presidents, and I'm gone down with the flu. Cam would say, oh, this is a huge problem. I know exactly what Rich would do, or I know exactly what Rich would say in this situation. If that happens, I know that I've done a great job mentoring Cam, because what you want to do is convey to them what your values are, which are the values of the institution. And I actually made a hard card and actually listed all of the 10 values of Norwich University. And I could talk for hours off that hard card. And I made that hard card and I gave it to every kid, every parent. I gave it to the trustee. Says, listen, you can talk from this card anywhere. Tell people what our values are and how we are going to teach these values to 18-year-olds. Thankfully, their parents had done a pretty good job getting them ready, but we were going to really buff and polish them. So being real clear about what are your values, how do you make good decisions, tough decisions. You involve a lot of people, and you want a lot of people that have different points of view, because you need to pick the best. And you don't always have the right answer. One of your troopers should have the right answer, though. And knowing and giving them credit for that and trusting all build the team that much closer, where the team didn't feel threatened if somebody said, hey, Rich, the bursar's office is not clearing the bills quick enough. It's screwing up admissions and it's screwing up the registration of kids into the new courses. Well, if you have a defensive bursar, they could get real upset. But if they know, look, we're just trying to make this good for kids and make this be the best experience it can be for them, and we never blamed anybody. By the way, your employees, I guess this is another one for your new presidents or presidents. Generally, your employees will do anything to do a great job for you. They will work their heart out to do a great job for you if you build that relationship with them. They have to feel safe enough to come to you and say, hey, boss, this idea that you've floated is really a lousy idea. Let me tell you why. And not feel like you're going to get shot at the knees. Because if they're afraid of you, they will never tell you when you're screwed up or standing into danger. And you can't do that as a young officer. You can't do it as a senior officer in the service. You need your senior NCOs, your non-commissioned officers, telling you, hey, second lieutenant, it ain't going to work. And you have to pay attention to that. So I credit one of my best mentors was my senior chief, gunner's mate, because I went to Vietnam as a gunnery officer. And man, we had a great relationship. The guy called me his whole life after. He would watch there's a bunch of movies out, Masters and Commanders or something, sailing ship stuff. His nickname was Snocker John. And by the way, that fit. He would call me usually looped and, crying on the other end of the phone. And, well, wouldn't it be great to go back? What? Senior chief? I don't know. But he felt comfortable telling me. So how the leader interacts, even with the most junior people, I'm talking about even the janitors, when you're walking through the dorms, you'll be amazed how much the janitors know what's going on with your kid. If you're a parent, like who's really not doing well, the janitors know. And they know if there are, beer bottles in the can or not. And a lot of things that your faculty will never know because they don't go where the kids live, and the janitors do. I forget what president of the United States it was, but he walked into NASA, into the men's room, and who's going to use the men's room? And there was a janitor in there. And he says, what are you doing? He said, Mr. President, I'm putting a man on the moon. He said, what? He said, yes, no one will come to work here if the bathrooms are dirty. Now, think about that. And by the way, that's true in higher ed. One of the number one things that mothers decide on whether to send their kid to your school is how clean are the restrooms. Dads want to know, how's the hockey team doing? Because they figure if the hockey team's winning, the physics department has to be doing a good job. And the kids just are trying to find out who they're going to date and do they have a major that I want and can I play my sport? But everybody has a role in servicing your customer. So, Mr. President's a business, it's the same thing. And higher ed is a word of mouth business. It's what stories can they tell about your school? So that's how I got to be there, Cam. Everything along the way, though, got me better prepared to be the president at Norwich. And I believe I've definitely improved during the course of that 28 years. These are things I want to talk about. They were important to me. So vision without resources is hallucination. This drives me absolutely nuts. I walk into a consulting thing and they've got this great vision. I said, okay, let me see the balance sheet. And let me see what resources you are budgeting to those issues. Oh, we don't have any. We're just saying it. Well, then that's all you're going to get is just talk. So vision without resources is hallucination. And the role of the president is to find the resources that the hockey coach needs, that the ROTC colonel needs for his soon-to-be second lieutenants, or the physics department needs to run their labs. And without it, everybody agrees. So knowing where the money is, I think every president should be the treasurer also for a year simultaneously. I had to be at Norwich, and that's where I really learned the bodies were buried, and where things were working well and where they were not. So when I counsel with presidents, I said, don't promise more than you can deliver on. Yes, you need a compelling vision, but you need to be able to execute it on it, and execute it on it for 2 or 3 years. And then after you're stabilized, then you can go to the next step. Don't jump 15 years later. And yes, that would be a great vision statement, but there's no way in how you're going to convince anybody you can get there, and you're going to die trying. And you have to keep winning each time. Same is true with fundraising. You have to give them clear things that you need. Like, Cam, when we built the new rink, we really needed a new rink, but I had to convince the alums that we really needed a new rink. It actually went down to the line at the board. I had some board members saying yes, and other board members saying we can't afford it. And I kept saying, you can't afford not to do it, because that will bring us more. And to their credit, the full board finally agreed with the president. And those two, one of them, which was the head of the investment committee, always supported us. Once the board made a decision, this is a good point about governance, they all got back in line and would do anything to accomplish that vision. And you need the faculty doing the same thing. You need the coaches doing the same thing. You need the ROCCs doing the same thing. So once a decision is made, we need everybody supporting that. And they may not agree with it, and it's their right to hold that internally. It's not their right to work against it. If the duly appointed people say, this is what we're going to do, and that's usually the end of the line are the trustees for higher ed, then we have to make that happen. Or as young officers or even senior officers are taught, if you can't support your commander, you should resign. Like, first off, you can't accept any illegal order. But second, if you can't really support them, just say, hey boss, I'm sorry, I just can't do my best work here. I don't believe in that, what you're talking about. Why don't we try to find an easy way for me and a gentle way to make a change so you can get some people that believe in your approach? Because their passive aggressiveness is alive and well. And I don't care where you're working. The question is, are you smart enough to see it? And they're usually smarter than you are about this, about keeping it secret, because you don't know what's being said when others are at the water cooler. Like, did you hear what the boss said the other day? We're going to do what? Like, all right, so why don't I stop? I mean, that's kind of like how I got to where I got to. A lot of baggage along the way, but it was great fun. I miss it terribly.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I know there's probably a lot of directions, but one thing that I wanted to ask about, and you hit a couple different parts of it, but when I got hired at Norwich, one of the first things was a breakfast with the president. And that was whoever got hired. I don't know if I think it was maybe monthly. And we all got handed a card. So you talked about the card. I had the card. It sat on the desk. It sat on my desk in my office. And you talked about and left an impression on me, because again, we had faculty, we had people from the ROTC or the military side, we had civilians. And one of the most impactful things I remembered was we had at Norwich, they wore blue shirts, but you explained the importance of the blue shirt, and you talked about the cleanliness and the campus and what that meant. And for a lot of time, I remembered that, or still to this day, I remember that breakfast of just all of these people that got hired in one place the same month. You came in, you spent time with them, but then you kind of like you gave them the importance. And I just wondered if you could talk about how long you did that, when that started. I mean, you were 28 years as a president. Again, that was impactful in my like welcoming to the town and the school.
I'm I'm so glad you said it. Thanks. You're making my point about building team, about it's all relationship building. And if I had, and I did it, I think maybe from my second year there, my first 2 years were like we were at general quarters. The rest of your non-military people not know what that is, but that's when everybody on the ship is at their battle stations. That's general quarters. We're prepared to fight right there. We had a $30 million budget, and I walked into it at $3.5 million over in the red. We were bleeding cash. So, and some of your guys that are probably listening to this may have been in similar situations. I found it to be a way to make sure if I had met, let me do it this way. If I had met just with the faculty separately and then the staff separately and then the blue shirters, which are the maintenance people, I wouldn't been able to brag about how each one works together. Having them all in the room at the same time lets me do that. To explain to the faculty, hey, listen, you can't teach in a cold classroom. You better thank the guy that's running the heating plant here. Like, it made them appreciate how the whole thing hangs together. And I felt like I was constantly teaching, Cam. And I think your presidents do have to constantly teach. Like, I taught basic accounting to them when I first got there. The faculty thought we were doing fine. In fact, the board felt we were doing fine with Vermont College. So that, remember the 2 campuses I talked about in the beginning? Vermont College, we think, actually was the first college established uniquely for adults. But I worked for 8 years to make them profitable. We were making money at the military campus, the Northfield campus, and we were sending it to Montpelier. Drove me crazy. And then these guys in Montpelier would beat up on the military guys. I felt like Henry Kissinger in the Middle East, if you can imagine at a faculty meeting. I mean, it was not a good model. And I think this is leading me to another one of those life lessons. So the breakfasts helped me kind of level the playing field. Like, guys, we're in this fight together and we count on each one of us to be successful. And it's one team, one fight. I used to use that saying too, Cam. One team, one fight. Matt, I think, is familiar with that term. The hard card actually came from the CNO in Vietnam, reminding everyone what your values are is so important, because at the end of the day, it has to be the values that win. The leader can't violate the values. By the way, this is, I think, a reason why we're having problems in the country right now. Our leader is not acting like what we've seen before in regards to his speaking and dealing with people. So the leader has to be consistent. That's another attribute thing. You have to be consistent so that when the leader's not there, we all know how Rich Schneider would decide that problem. But that was the first opportunity for me to make contact with the new employee, so that when I told them, and I told you, listen, I won't remember your name, but you know that I'm trying. And by the way, when school was really small in 92, when I started, I memorized all the Rooks' names because we used to take pictures of them for their ID cards. I memorized all the Rooks' names by Thanksgiving. Now, there were a lot smaller classes than I ended up with, I think. And as I got older, that got harder to do. But I did that. I tried to do that too for the faculty and staff and the blue shirters and everybody else that worked at school. So I'm thrilled that it meant a difference to you, because I wanted it to be a difference for you. I wanted you to know that you have joined something that's different. That's all about values and all about getting this generation ready to protect us and defend us. And we're the adults. They're the ones looking at us. It shouldn't be the other way around, right? We're supposed to be the role models. So this is how the role models are supposed to behave. Now, everyone is supposed to behave this way at school, but you had to start with somewhere. And our upperclassmen were awesome. They got it right away. Of course, we made the Corps memorize it too, so they all could spout it out. But when the accreditors came, they couldn't believe how everybody at school knew our mission statement. Everybody, even the civilian kids. Like, everybody knows your mission statement. That's a miracle. I said, no, it's hard work. You know, it's keeping them focused on what business are we in. And by the way, for some of your new presidents, you have got to make sure you don't fight on too many fronts. You got to know what's important and really work on that until you got that down really solid. Then you can start broadening the aperture. But if you don't have the basics down, don't put anything else on top of it. You haven't proved to me that you can do the basics yet. So I kept stressing that too, about we need to have the best run school we can for the benefit of the students. They deserve it. That's our responsibility to them before we go after the next sport or whatever. We should be doing great with the stuff that we're doing. Because if you are, word of mouth will support you. If you're not, they're going to assume everything is screwed up. So, Matt's seen this, I'm sure, in the Air Force. We don't have the tanker guys that can give us fuel when we're trying to fight and keep going, where you can't get ahead of your logistics line. The same in the Coast Guard. If I don't have fuel and water, I'm in big trouble aboard ship. I can only stay out there for so long, and I have to come back. And Coasties never want to come back. They just want to keep saving people, and we'll stay out there. So it was an easy thing to do. I thought it got them talking to each other, which you have to have in an organization. And, people have done like no email Fridays or something, right? So people had to talk to each other. I think in some ways we've forgotten how to talk to each other, or we've lost that skill of listening and arguing and things like that. So that's more than you wanted to hear, but it was an easy thing to do for any president, not hard. And you got to know your people. I wish I had had time to go back and cycle through everyone, but I had departmental meetings. So like when I first got there, the first year was like drinking by a fire hose, but I got every department alone. So sometimes it was 4 people and sometimes it was 40 people to do the same thing. Talk about the values. Why was I here? What the board had asked me to do. How did I view their work? Things like that, Cam, so that the leader can not just be, the guy behind the screen, but a real person.
Thank you, sir. You referenced the Z-gram. You talking about Admiral
Yeah, I'm trying to think of his name. We had a Zumquist or something like that.
Yeah.
Zumquist?
Zumwalt, Elmo Zumwalt Jr. He was the CNO.
We have also long sideburns. That was another big thing that he brought into the service. Like we're fighting in Vietnam. Does it really make a difference how long my sideburns are?
Yeah.
Anyway, but the hardcore thing I did take as a good thing. Zumwalt.
Right.
Right.
Well, don't mention the sideburns today, sir. That you won't be in good standing. People.
Well, the Air Force went a little outside of the normal.
Yeah.
Drift of things.
Yeah. We fly better. We fly better, sir, with big mustaches and long sideburns. Just so you know.
Well, look at the old pictures of sailors.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, just from my perspective, when I showed up at Norwich, I came from a very difficult assignment. I worked for somebody it was very challenging and did not possess the interpersonal skills that you did. And I had never lived in Vermont. I'd been to Vermont growing up, literally lived in New Hampshire, but I think as a New Englander, to go to the next state is a significant emotional event. A lot of people just stay. A lot of people are homebodies and whatnot. But I just wanted to say, just when I showed up at Norwich, and I know you're tracking my family situation, it was very hard. I was selected to come to Norwich long before my son was diagnosed, with cancer and stuff like that. And I just wanted to just say to you a personal thank you for just making me. I'm not a Norwich grad. I'm not a Service Academy graduate. Had never been to a senior, didn't graduate from a senior military college. And I just wanted to say thank you to you. And I appreciate your the level of humility that you had and the time that you gave me and listened to my concerns, both personally and professionally. And I just wanted to say the fact that you made every person who walked into your office feel as they were the most important person in the world. And I heard that from more than one person. I heard that from my peer group. And you gave us the same amount of time as you did to folks who were on the Norwich payroll. And I just wanted to say thank you for that. And just thank you for making me feel like me and my airmen were part of the team. So I just want to say thanks and appreciate it.
You're welcome. It was an honor to have you.
Thank you.
Heartbreaking for your son.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, sir. And I just, it was heartbreaking, but there was never a point where I didn't feel like I had your support or the support of my teammates at Norwich. And I think I could have been in a lot of other places, could have been deployed and just, could have been at the Pentagon for that matter and had a very challenging, probably impersonal sort of assignment. And it was anything but that. And I think I attribute that to you. So thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. It means a
Yes,
lot.
sir.
Thank you.
Sir, can you talk a little bit? You mentioned you're an outsider, you come to Norwich and there was resistance, and then you connect the campuses. There was resistance. I've heard stories, but there was resistance. And even like in my world, right, there was hockey and the men's team's crushing, and then you had women's hockey. So I don't want to say there's resistance, but to any kind of change, there's usually resistance. And so as a leader, how you handled that and how you navigated that with the way you did, because again, I walked into the stories of it, and maybe some of the aftershock even after, but like now you have a campus in one location that has such a unique environment. And really, I think people can thank you for that, but just talking about navigating that change in the face of so much resistance.
Well, culture change is the hardest thing we have to deal with. as leaders, I think. And we certainly had that at Norwich. Remember, the main campus, which is the cadet campus, used to be only all men, and Vermont College, about 12 miles away, was an all-girls school. It had started as a seminary, actually, and over the time had turned to a junior college. And Vietnam happened, and both schools were really struggling financially. They were starting to sell off property to pay payroll. That's usually the first sign that death's coming organizationally. And I had inherited a campus both campuses that were at war with each other and didn't care what was happening over the horizon. So they were so consumed with each other and so distrustful of each other. They were not looking at what was happening in higher ed in general. So I took the role of teaching them. They all cared. They all cared about their unique place to the point that they didn't want these other guys to be successful. They would have done anything not to have them be successful. So we're all grieving together. We didn't want to make us feel bad if they were doing so great. They're going to beat up on us or something. And the trick there is never beat up on anybody. Fix the problem. And you don't have to beat up on anybody. So you have to teach them, why are we in trouble? And what are we going to do about it? And I did. I went to Vermont College and I wore my uniform. The guy before me, a wonderful guy who had been a Norwich grad, his father's a Norwich grad and his son is a Norwich grad. He's dead now, but he would take his clothes off, his uniform off, and change into civilian clothes as a sign of respect for the civilian campus. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm the same guy no matter what I'm wearing. I could wear pajamas at both places and I'm going to say the same thing. So I am not going to waste my time like stopping for a phone booth somewhere, right? And I went up there and I told them what was going on. And I said, if we have too much plant for the size we have, and by the way, this is the Achilles heel of every college right now is deferred maintenance. The buildings won't tell you because they're not screaming at you. We need more money. Who screams at you? The faculty and the staff. So where does the money go? It goes to the screamers. And the poor roof on the rink may be leaking, right? But the roof doesn't scream at you. And chances are you're not going to scream at me either. So teaching them about what's wrong here and how do we make it right? I eventually said, listen, we have too much plant. The plant up in Montpelier was a beautiful little campus, all Victorian homes, not a stick of insulation, asbestos everywhere. I mean, it was a nightmare of deferred maintenance costs that were going to come crashing down on us. I said, okay, we're going to build you a new building on the military campus. And they say, we're not coming. That's just an example of their lousy attitude towards our United States military. It was fine for us to take a check with the Norwich seal on it, but we're not going to go to that other campus. I said, fine, I'm selling you. I decided that day when they say, no, we're not moving. Because I was trying to keep the whole family together because I did believe, and I do believe in adult education, which is what it ended up being. The step before that, Cam, was I moved all the civilian kids to the main campus. And I moved the adults to the Montpelier campus. We had adults in a building. They were there on short-term assignments. So they were there like 1 weekend a month, or they were there for 8 days, and then they would go away for 6 months. Low residency model. And I needed to grow that population because that was the population I could see growing in education. So I swapped kids. That was my first culture crisis. Oh my God, the civilian kids are going to be on the military campus. Why would anybody want to be in the Corps if the Corps kids see the civilian kids sleeping in? I said, guys, if the Corps is doing the right stuff, the civilian kids should want to join us. This is really fun. This is like cool what we're doing here. And so I moved them. Now the board, I taught the board. It took me 2 years to get the board to agree, but I got them to agree and we moved the two populations. That was the first step. The Montpelier campus started booming, absolutely booming, and financially now making money. And when they said, we're not going to move back, I said, okay, we're going to, one of three things. We'll either sell you, we'll let you buy yourself and find your own way, or you guys can just decide to close. But I am not going to subsidize you at all. And I gave them a timeline that, metrics they had to meet. I think probably the first ever, Vermont had a TV network for colleges. And Cam, what I did is I had two students, a Corps kid and a civilian kid, with me on the TV, and we broke the alums up by time zone. And I went on the air because it was the alums, the WACO alums in particular, that were driving me crazy and were not supporting us in this move. And I wanted to have them hear from us about how we were going to do this and why we had to do it. And so we we did it, and they could just sign in to this TV cable network thing. It cost us a little bit of money, but it was well worth it to get the dialogue going. I looked on the main campus, and one of my best, most revered administrators is and was Frank Vanacek, a business dean of our business school. And I said, Frank, I want you to get these kids together, core kids and civilian kids, have them elect or whatever they want to do. I don't care how they pick them. I need 10 each. And I want the new rules written by them. What are the new rules? Like, are they both going to have chow together or not going to have chow together? Things like that. Now, what had to change or what have you. So they were involved in the new rules making. We launched it. And then 2 years later, I sell the main campus. It was a great deal. We took some debt and cash. I put the cash right in the endowment. The debt was at 14%. Geez, I still wish I had some of that. But they paid every quarter like clockwork. And the first Moody's wrote us up as a way to get rid of something with integrity. So we were in the deaccession mode. We sold an asset. We sold 1,000 students, all the buildings, all the faculty, staff, everything, turnkey operation to the Union Institute in Ohio. Half the faculty had their PhDs from the school. And it was because they really believed in low residency, which was the way we deliver our educational model for adults. And we banked all that money at just the right time. I got rid of all that deferred maintenance. The thing that happened, though, and here's the message for your presidents, we were able to focus on the thing that we were really born to do in 1819. It was everything at one campus. I had no more Henry Kissingers at faculty staff meetings like I was fighting in the Middle East. It was all one purpose. And man, that did a lot of good for everything. We got rid of half the committees at school because we had a committee that looked like each one, an academic committee for Vermont College and an academic committee for the Northfield campus. It just streamlined everything. I mean, I had 2 deans of students. Believe it or not, one example is one Saturday, I had 2 comedians, one up there and one down on Northfield for the kids. Like, why am I doing this? Why do we have all these expenses? Well, you got to have 2 for every. No, let them all party together, for God's sakes. They all wanted to date each other anyway. So from a morale point of view for the student body, I knew that I had won. When the civilian kids moved to campus, they actually had snowball fights together. Previously, when the Vermont College kids lived up in Montpelier, they would catch a white bus. It was called the Gray Goose. They would sleep up there, have breakfast up there, drive the bus down. The kids would get off. They'd have morning classes. They'd have lunch there, but behind a screen so that none of the civilian kids could see what was happening to the rooks. We want them separated. Then they'd all do afternoon classes. They'd all play sports at Northfield, except I think women had 2 sports because most of the women were up there. The Corps didn't have many women then. They'd had a lot more by the time I was finished. And then they would run like hell for the last bus at 9:00 at night because all the computers were there. The only people that ever graduated from that model were the nurses and the architects. And the reason is all of their classes were in Montpelier. They never had to come to Northfield. So when we sold them, I kept nursing and I kept architecture and I sold everything else. Now, how did I get through that culture piece? There are some white knuckles around the table, I know, in the boardroom when we decided to sell Vermont College. There were no white knuckles 6 months later. I kept explaining what was happening, explaining the transition, explaining the new rules, showing the financial benefit. And eventually I made real believers out of them. Like, oh my God, it may have been the most important decision I made in my presidency for 28 years was to get them back doing what they were originally commissioned to do in 1819. And finding your roots of what's your purpose. And I think some presidents try to become bigger than they really need to be, rather than doing what you were tasked to do really, really well. So it depends on what your motivation is. My motivation was doing excellence in everything that we could do. And by the way, I'm very proud of the fact that I did bring women's hockey to Norwich, but I had a trustee who actually brought 4 women's sports to Norwich at the same time. The reason is I needed to grow women. We did not have enough women on the main campus. And so we used those sports as a recruiting tool, it was women's rugby. In fact, I brought all of rugby varsity. I resourced them just like a varsity team. A volleyball, there was one other. I forget what the other was. But that really made a huge difference. The only time I ever had a problem was the boys didn't want me to let the girls say, she shoots, she scores. They wouldn't let me do that. I said, starting today, they can do that. And I remember George Como, our one of Norwich hockey commending me, like, I can't believe the president just did that. They never would say it before because they felt it was a guy thing and they didn't want to impact the guys' team. I said, guys, we're all cheering for you. It's one team, one fight. Why wouldn't we say for the women what we say for the guys? And they say, yeah, maybe you're right. So it's teaching people like, hey, maybe your preconceived notion of this isn't really legitimate anymore. That's hard to give up. And for some people, they'll just go to their grave and think we screwed it up. But I wasn't running the school for them. I was running the school for the kids that were there and to be officers of what we needed 4 years from now. That was another big problem. And many of your college presidents or even you coaches, there were traditions for some of these teams that in today's world just cannot happen, right? And giving up those traditions, even though they say they did they really do it? And there are schools that have gotten in trouble over this, gone to court actually over this in Vermont, right? Well, the same was true with the Corps, which has very heavy laden traditions. But your regular business presidents, there's all kinds of cultural issues in every department that they're trying to have work together and calling it out and saying, guys, this is not what we're doing. This violates one of my 10 principles. And if you can link it to one of those 10 principles, hey, like we treat everybody with respect. How is that respecting them? And by the way, presidents have to let the silence happen. When you ask that big rhetorical question, most of us hate silence. It can be one of the most powerful tools for a president to say, guys, this is not acceptable. It is against our values. What do you think about that? But then don't say anything else. Let them answer your question. The same is true with raising money too, by the way. Cam, I could really use your $10,000 to support the hockey team. Will you do it? And then let the silence happen. Let them wrestle with that question. And I raised a lot of money for Norwich. And it's bringing the need. You got to articulate the need and the vision of what we could do if you supported us. But if you don't support us, that's okay. That's your choice. I'm just going to go find somebody that will support me. Because this is what we have to do for Norwich or for General Electric or for that team that ever you're coaching. This is what we have to do to be successful. That was a long answer to your really good question about that. But listen, all of this stuff, and I guess I'm sorry that I'm dribbling on, but the reason is it's all related. It's all connected. You can't just segregate. You have to be this kind of like moderator, mentor, educator, business guy, got the money thing. Because if the money's not right, everybody's grieving. All kind of wrapped up into one. And always the glass is more than half full. You have to keep hope alive. We do this in the military. I mean, we may be losing. And by the way, I don't know if you watched the PBS thing on the American Revolution. If you're not watching it, everybody needs to watch this about how those leaders had to keep hope alive. And the odds were against them. The weather was against them. The weather's been against Matt, I'm sure, when he's been flying and has mission to do. Certainly is against the Coasties. Everybody else is running to come in up for it. We're fighting our way out to get the kid that's in trouble out there. The leader has to keep hope alive. And that's done interpersonally, sometimes with a phone call, patting them on the back and say, listen, you can do this. This is really important. You have to do this for school, or you have to do this for the team. I know you want to play that spot, but that's not where I need you right now. You are better over here for the good of the team. And I know you guys have issues, I'm sure, with that. I had trouble with VPs and I moved people around. That's why I wasn't joking. I became the treasurer in Norwich for a year, my first year, because I took the treasurer, the only senior officer I had, and I put him down running cadets, a guy named Annie Melville, who Matt was the first dean, I think, of the Air Force Academy or something like that. He was like an 06 there. And I became the treasurer. I was also the commandant for a year while I was the president, because I had fired the other commandant for doing something really stupid and against a direct order. And I was the provost for a year. That one almost cost me my marriage, I think. That's a hard job. But it was interesting. Each of those groups where I served as the vice president, the same time I'm the president. And I would joke with them and saying, God, I just came from the president's office. I had an unbelievable argument with him, but that group that I was being their vice president for loved it because they were able to teach me more about what was happening within that unit that I may not know. So cycling in like in between VPs or something like that, I think it's fine to let that coast for a while. And unless you're an extremist, okay? I could do the treasurer job even though we're an extremist financially because I knew how to do that and I had been it before and I could do that out of my back pocket. The provost job was a little bit harder. And that's a lot more time sensitive because there's a lot more interpersonal relations. I was never the AD though. Cam, you'd be very pleased to know that I was never, that job is too hard too. But it's not bad when the senior guy steps in and does that other job for a while. You'll do your own job better, and you'll look for something maybe a little different with what you're looking for. And generally, presidents have that flexibility. They don't want you to think that, but they do have that flexibility. And if the need is great enough, they'll move other stuff around. Maybe that's a good time to give another assignment to Matt to do something that you might normally have done, so you could do more of the commandant's job or something like that. You always want to be keeping growing your people, right? And that's the idea of the cabinet. I would bring that problem to the cabinet. I said, listen, and that's after I fired the guy. I wouldn't tell him I was doing it in advance, but after I fired the guy, I said, guys, I'm going to have to do this job. It's going to take us 8 months to find a new one, and I'll do it, but I'm going to need your help. Who would like to help and how? Let them think about it, because you want them eventually to be able to take over your job, right? So getting that other experience, especially of proven managers, and it may not be a unique area, but they know how to help manage people and personalities, which you too know how to do. In fact, that's the basis of this whole blog that you're working on, right? It's how do you lead your people?
Right.
Right. And some guys are really good at it, and some guys are good at it on paper, but they're in life, they're not. They should be able to do it. You would think they could, but the fact of the matter is, the thing that I learned, most military guys don't ever fire anybody. They wait 2 years, and either they're going to get transferred or the other person gets transferred. When you're the president of the organization and you're going to be there for a while, you can't just wait them out, because if they're grieving the organization, that's not allowing you to accomplish your mission. One of the best things you can do to tell a guy is, I don't think you're having a good time here. Let me help you find something else that you'd really rather do, so I can get somebody else to do this. Or I moved people around where I thought, well, I know you want to be an infielder, but I really think you're a better outfielder. Let's try that for a while. And more than half the time it worked, not all the time. Some of them could only visualize themselves as an infielder. But shimbling the deck every once in a while is not a bad thing. People will see things differently. It's a little risky, though. You have to be able to handle the risk. But that's what presidents do. We all measure the risk, and are the returns worth it? And if they are, then we'll go do it.
Sir, 2 more things from me, and we'll let you wrap things up. But 2 quick things. One is, some of our listeners are of the younger generation, and they're aspiring leaders, whether that's they want to be, elite athletes or coaches, head coaches, or presidents of university or senior officers and stuff like that. What would you tell, Swab Schneider or Cadet Schneider, in today's day and age? What modicum of success, would you say to aspire to, or what methodologies would you articulate to them? Like, what advice you would offer them? And then give thanks to, I know you talked about just some mentors you had when you were coasting, but just some folks you would give thanks to.
Yeah. So the advice to the new crowd coming in is, watch very carefully. Be a great observer of who's doing well and who's not, and what about their leadership styles. You're going to have good leaders and you're going to have bad leaders. And not all of them are all one way. Some of your bad leaders have some good traits too, right? We're not all bad. Generally, we're not all good. There's flaws in everyone. We're human beings, right?
Right.
So pick and choose the ones that are good and use those, practice those, model them. I think talking to those people, saying, listen, I'd like you to mentor me. First off, it's a great honor for that person to be asked. Second, you may need that person to help you later on, because you're going to bump into things that maybe you really can't sort out yourself as a young person. And they will help you if they know that you've been doing the homework. It's just like being a faculty member. If I have a bunch of kids in the class and you've been doing the homework and Gumblatz hasn't been doing the homework, and you come in and ask for help, I'm going to give the help to the guy that's been doing the homework, right? And Gumblatz, I said, you go back and do your homework and then you can come see me, right? Because you're wasting my time. So asking for mentorship is really, I think, really important. I don't think doing more than 3. You don't want to hit everybody in your organization from the president on down, but you can ask 2 or 3 people to mentor you. In the military, it's already programmed for you. At least one of those mentors will be your senior non-commissioned officer. As a young second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain, they always tell us, listen to your enlisted troops, your leaders of your enlisted troops. It's still your decision, but you better weigh what they're saying carefully. They've seen the good and the bad and the ugly.
Right.
And pay attention when they're telling you something. The same might be true for coaches. I don't know. You got a long-seated assistant coach who's a great recruiter, and you got to listen to him sometimes, and it may not line up with you, but you got to at least give the time to the guy to explain why and have him prove it to you. But don't do more than 2 or 3. I think you can't do a good job as a mentee because you don't want to waste the time of your mentor. You only want to do really good things with them. And you can say, look, I notice you do this one thing. I'd really love to do that with you and practice that and see where it goes. And then I guess at the same time, you have got to become an expert in that specific thing for which you're responsible. You cannot fake your way through this stuff. And that was true well before internet. It was probably true before printing. You have to know your trade. Like, I am a professional maritime person. I am a Coast Guard officer. So what would you say you are? Cam, you have a very clear, I am a hockey coach. Okay. Matt's going through the conversion right now. He was a colonel, but now he's doing this teaching leader thing, the stuff that he practiced. But that's a different answer.
Right.
Than your answer, unless you're going to do this full time too. But so who are you, guys? Presidents, who are you? What do you want to be an expert in? And go do that. Like, make sure you're going to the regional or national meetings to hear what the other guys are working on. And if you have to fund it yourself, go fund it yourself. But ask your mentor, like, hey, this thing is happening 4 towns over. Can I have 2 days off? This is why I really want to go. Look what they're talking about here. This is the stuff I need. And it's cheap professional development, right? If you piggyback on somebody else that's already offering it rather than buying somebody to give it to me uniquely. So anyway, I'm a big believer in mentoring, but not to excess. You also have to know your trade.
That's exceptional, sir. And I just, again, emphasize the fact that you're a natural mentor, and however you came by that, whether it was, the senior non-commissioned officer that you had when you first came out of the Coast Guard Academy. I know Cam concurs as well, but thank you for being a natural mentor, not just to Cam and I, but just to everyone you came in contact with. So thank you for that. But opportunity for you to kind of give thanks to, some people in your life, if you want to take a few moments.
Geez, there's so many that it's scary because I know that I would leave some out. So maybe talking about Senior Chief Connor, John Connor, my first real chief, Matt, he was my first real NCO. Cadets didn't come into contact with NCOs very much unless we were on summer cruise aboard regular Coast Guard cutters. But it was almost like a group that we didn't understand very well. Now they actually have them embedded in the school at
Right.
Coast Guard Academy, which is great. He used to say he weaned me, and Insect Schneider, and he made me the tradesman to be a gunnery officer. He taught me the trade in ways that I hadn't seen it before. We had gunnery classes and stuff like that, but it's not the same as a senior chief teaching you about it. My first wife was a great Coast Guard wife, and Jamie, my second wife, after I got my 4 girls married off, I started looking, so I got married again, and was a great president's wife. Oh my God, the kids loved her. She told them, all of them, just call me Jamie. And we would walk the campus with our dogs at night, just talking to kids. Probably the best part of the job. I'd rather talk to the kids than the faculty senate about parking.
Or the trustees, sir, just to be fair, right?
Yeah, right. Thank you. We always make parking for trustees.
Yeah, right.
But I had some great mentors at Drexel that gave me a lot of opportunity to probably go in positions much higher than my age would have normally allowed. But I was, I think, pretty good at what I did, even as a vice president. But the fact that they let me be a vice president over a number of different areas over the 8 years was unbelievable training for me to be your president. So Bill Gaither, I think, is the one who was the guy that hired me at Norwich, at Drexel. I would credit with that. And then you always learn stuff from your students too. And I picked some very unique regimental commanders. Actually, this was some blowback, Cam, that I got too. Some of the regimental commanders I picked did not intend to join our military, but they were just unbelievable natural leaders and great cadets. They had a right to try. And some of the ROTC kids said, no, it should just be an ROTC thing. Like, they're going in. No, I said, you need to be a leader in whatever you want to be. One went into professional baseball, not as a player, but as a manager. Unbelievable kid, So sometimes leaders have to break the mold and withstand the pushback. But if you're doing it based on your values, your heart card, whatever is on that card, you got plenty of cover. You can say, hey, I got that, but this is what I'm doing, and here's why. Always explaining is really important. Explaining why you decided what you decided. I have fired 2 people at Norwich They were wonderful people, and it really hurt me to do it, but they could never bring themselves to say why they made a decision. They would only say, no, I'm the blank and I said so. Okay. And no, that's not how you build team. And I coached them. I mentored them. I thought I could change them. Listen, you can't change anybody after the year 4. You got a 4-year-old, you got them. And that's what you got. And don't feel, and it's just like a marriage or something. Don't feel like, yeah, I love this person, but I'm going to change them. You're not. You got what you've got. And if they're not open to changing, some people can make changes. I'm not saying we are stuck, but there are some people that are stuck, that even though you mentor them and tell them, you can't say no because I said so. That's not a good answer. They did it anyway. I probably, if anything, suffered them too long. I should have fired them sooner. After the 3rd or 4th month of them still saying it. And I would go back and say, listen, I just heard from the English department. This is what you said. Yeah, that's what I said. I said, well, why didn't you tell them why? Well, I don't have to do that. Yes, I do. Yes, you do. But remember, many faculty members have very high IQ, but very low EQ. And what that was screaming was no EQ, no emotional quotient, no emotional intelligence. They were so smart, they just assumed everybody realized the same answer. I've seen some generals do that too. I've seen one admiral do that too. And the commandant was all over him for that. So that would be my closing shot. I think I would do it all again in a minute. I think I was exactly in the right place at the right time for the gang that hired me. Would I have loved to stay in the Coast Guard? Sure. I was able to stay in it part-time. So that was a great decision. And it ended up, I'm still dealing with young seamen. I mean, officers love to deal with the young ones to get them ready to be the senior ones. So I had all of that. Why would I need anything bigger, right? I was doing what I was supposed to do. I think what I was built to do. And if you're in a job and that's how you feel, that's great. Do you know how many people are miserable in their jobs?
Yes, sir.
A lot. A lot. Be thankful you found something that you love. It doesn't feel like work. I mean, Jamie would start calling me around 5:30, 6 o'clock. Like, are you ever coming home for supper? Oh yeah, but I got tied up in this other thing, that I really wanted to do. Rather than looking at your watch and at, 5 minutes of 5, you're starting to put your jacket on. That's not where you want to be in your professional life. But we have millions of people and one of your jobs is to find those people and fix them so that they don't feel like that. But that's how they feel. Like it's a job. It's not a calling. There's a difference. Find what you're called to do.
Well, sir, sorry.
No, you got it. I'm drained. You got everything that I could ever say that's worth anything, I hope.
Well,
I doubt.
Again, thank you so much. And as you set the environment and the culture and whatnot, again, I would just let you know that Matt and our relationship was really basically kind of some of the things that you talked about. And it was a young first-time head coach that was in an environment at Norwich University that was connected to a Air Force colonel through a student who was a captain. And I was looking for a mentor and asking for that. And again, so the environment that you set, the culture that you set was one of those students that was in the ROTC in the Air Force, connecting these two guys that he had impact with, and me going to ask for that service. So I hope that you can find some value in today. That
it's awesome. It's a great story. I'm going to use it when I'm talking to alums.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you so much for your time and
Thanks.
for all your leadership.
Well, I love it. So love you two guys too. Thanks for doing what you do at school, and what you're undertaking is like fabulous too. So good luck to you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye.